going to totally embarrass you because now you're in front of 6 people. So I'll be here, but I got new agent training.
Oh shit! Yeah, sorry.
Don't be.
And so let's say it's like that. 1355. So she could lose one of those and still be making her mortgage.
Yeah.
Like she could lose one of the.
But it might last a long time.
Yeah. Okay.
Not having someone, so.
Well, cool. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So does it look kind of like
it looks doable,
right now,
but try to do some comps somewhere to make it work.
Ooh,
you know, you just ask him. Say, what comps did you use? How did you price this? Yeah. I always lean on people, especially Isaac. He's so nice.
He's so nice.
Yeah.
He's such a good guy. Like, I haven't ever met him, so this will be the first time.
Oh, you'll love him.
Every time.
Yeah. Yeah, he's awesome. He's one of our favorite people.
Cool. Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody.
Hey! How you guys doing? Can you hear my voice? It kept dropping out in earlier meetings. So will you tell me today? Oh, you can close it. Thank you, Katie. If I start I start getting scratchy or you just can't hear me, let me know immediately because I've had it go on and off all day and I don't know which mic is best. I have 3 mics here, so whichever one works, I will be on. But sorry to keep you. Let's do a quick roundabout. Luis, how's your week or last couple of weeks going? You got out of your quarantine? You got back into society?
Yes, we are back. We are finally closing on Forest Avenue today.
Oh, we need a celebration.
Yeah, I'm gonna start drinking as soon as we get off. But so we also came in second on that apartment complex. It was 6.5 million, and we came in second, and that was my walk-in on my floor shift. It turns out he and his partners don't do anything under 15 million, but they made an exception for this apartment complex because they love Durango. Can you believe that?
I just feel like I never want bad things on people, so I always have the good face, but I think, you know, maybe something will come up for that buyer that got it, and it won't work out, and you'll just scoop it up.
No, they will buy something here. They will.
Down the road.
But anyways, we had a closing yesterday.
Yay! That's right. Did you close on one of the Tierra Way?
No, Way? it was 16 Pinedale Lane that Hosea helped us on.
Oh, that's right. Good job.
Yeah. Yep. And then we have a pretty strong prospect on.
Hey, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I have never done this in a class before, but I am going to go ahead and make you watch a 4-minute video because I saw this after the last time I taught this class and it was really good. And I thought, oh, I need to, hold on a sec. I got to share it again. Forgot to share the sound. Anyway, it really explains some of the things I'm going to try to talk about, and it was done by Colorado Association of Realtors. So bear with me.
Of Mic Drops. I'm your host, Richie Averill, and I'm joined today with Shanavi Johnson with Dora.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about a very great topic today. HOAs.
Everyone's favorite topic. Yay.
Absolutely. So for anyone that might be watching, what is an HOA and what does that encompass?
So an HOA is kind of the overarching terminology that we use. Really what it is any community that provides services to the homeowners such as trash removal, snow removal, lawn maintenance, or just general maintenance. But the legal term is common interest community. And so while your association may not be called an HOA, it would still fall under a common interest community if it provides any sort of services to the homeowners. And that's what an HOA is.
Okay, thank you. So for a future home buyer that might be looking to buy in an HOA, what are some things they should know before buying that home?
So the number one thing you're going to want to know are the restrictions that an HOA has. A lot of HOAs here in Colorado restrict renting, short-term rentals for those of us that love Airbnb, as well as pet restrictions. So you're going to want to know if your HOA or the one you're thinking about purchasing into has those types of restrictions.
Okay, good to know. And so what about if this home that they're looking to buy happens to have a violation or potentially have a violation with the HOA? Is there a way that this potential home buyer could find that out before buying?
So generally speaking, what you're going to want to look at is the status letter.
Okay.
Most sellers will provide that to the purchaser prior to them closing on the deal. However, if you don't receive one, you can always ask the seller to get one from the association or speak to the association yourself and ask if they have a status letter available.
And speaking of status letters, I've heard that sometimes a seller or a homeowner can get that status letter for free, yet if a buyer or potential buyer needs to get one, there's a charge for that. Is that true?
So it depends on the association. Generally speaking, the seller can get that for free,
Okay.
or the association may charge. However, if you're the purchaser, you will always have to pay for that. So if you can work with your seller, you can get that for free.
All right, good to know. So speaking of that, kind of going along with that question, what are some things a seller should do before putting their home in the market if it's in an HOA?
So the number one thing I recommend sellers do is kind of gather all of those important documents that you're going to want your purchaser to have. These are going to be your governing documents, such as your bylaws or covenants, meeting minutes, financial records, and of course that status letter. Those things, getting them together will make the process so much easier, not only on yourself but on your buyer as well, and then it gives them the opportunity to make sure that that's where they want to purchase a home in, especially if those restrictions don't match up with what they're wanting.
I can definitely say that having that information up front makes the process so much easier. Yeah. So what other tips or words of advice do you have for people looking to possibly buy a home in an HOA?
I think also just kind of showing what services that HOA provides. A lot of HOAs, do community events, block parties, they do community engagement events is great. I also would recommend just going around and speaking to some of the homeowners and asking their opinion on where they live. Do they like it? Do they like the board? Do they like the HOA, excuse me? How's the community manager? Are they easy to get in contact with? Do they respond regularly? All of these things are important to think about when you're purchasing into a new HOA.
Very good information. And we have quite a few HOAs in the state, am I right?
Yeah, there's about 9 million HOAs in the state of Colorado. So, somewhere around 5 million people live in HOAs.
So if you're watching this, there's a great chance that you're in an HOA.
Absolutely.
So HOAs don't have to be scary.
No, absolutely not. They should be, a community involved thing. They should be something that you look forward to living in and bringing up your property values, somewhere safe for you to live.
I love it. Great information. Shanavi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a great time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So there you have it, all the information about an HOA. So stay classy, Colorado, and we'll...
Whoop, hold on, let me get rid of that. Okay, so there was so much good information there. Let me go through some of it. I'm gonna start with what they were talking about. Did you catch how they said common interest community docs? So CIC, the name of the section we're going to talk about in the contract has changed over the years, and there was a while that it was called CIC docs, and that's exactly what she was talking about. So that doesn't necessarily mean I live in Edgemont Highlands where you have a structured like HOA thing. It can also relate to your buyer wanting out of the contract if they don't like the kind of loose leaf road association there, or any of those things, right? So there's HOAs, but there's also other common interest communities where people have gotten together and done something. It's just not necessarily called an HOA. So in the contract itself, I'm gonna go to that next. Let me pull it up on the screen. This is a little bit out of order, but because I'm talking about it now on the contract, I want you to know about it. Hold on one sec. Oh my gosh, I am not together. All of a sudden I thought I better make sure I'm recording. And I am. Okay, so here's the part of association docs in the contract. It's section 7. Now, if it wasn't a true owners association, like, if you're writing up an offer and you go and they say, well, there's no HOA, but we have this group of people and yeah, I think there's some documents somewhere. If it's kind of loose, then I think what I would do is still mark the section as active because this could still have to do with it. And then in additional provisions all the way down there, you'd write something, and I can provide you with this language another time. It would say like 1 dot. It would say the section 7 or paragraph 7 as it relates to the association or the road agreement or the whatever it is that has to do with that association. You know what I mean? So if it's not like a typical HOA, I'd probably make mention that, yeah, I know there's no HOA, but there is this other thing that we want to check out, and I'd like this to have to do with it. So what this is saying, the way I have told you in the past to explain this section to your buyer when you're writing up the contract, is the reason that this is in bold is the state of Colorado and our forum wants you to know that if you buy a property that's in an association of any sort, that you can't go and stick up a red flag in your yard after closing and say, I don't want to be part of the association. Too bad, you've bought into it, it's recorded, and you have to abide by their rules. Because that happens to people. They're like, I don't want to be part of that HOA. It's like, well, I'm sorry, you are. But then this is the part I wanted to talk about. Hold on, I'm making sure that I'm not missing anything. Association documents to buyer. This is a beautiful section. I actually used to provide my sellers a little paragraph that said, here's the kind of things you have to make sure you give to the buyer. Now, over the years, the rules have changed, and there's this thing, you don't have to remember this, but you probably learned this in real estate school. It's called CCIOA, the Common Interest Community Documents Rule. And you don't have to ever memorize it. It's like an 80-page document, and it governs all the associations in Colorado. So we used to have all these rinky-dink little HOAs, and now most of them are being managed by places like Harmony or AREM or one of these property management companies, because the rules are so severe now with what you are allowed to and not allowed to do. And I know this because I'm on an HOA board that hasn't gotten managed yet. It's a tiny HOA board, but we met with an attorney and I said, you know, do I have to do this as a secretary? And they're like, oh yeah, CCIOA makes you do all these like huge regulated things. So that's why usually now, when you have all of this stuff that has to go to the buyer, you call AREM or they call AREM. It's not like they have to go find something. It's generally like very easy process. So here's all the stuff that when you're talking to a seller, let's talk about the seller side first. These are the things that the seller is responsible to give to the purchaser when you go under contract for the association deadline. Now, when I'm taking the listing, that's why this is on the seller checklist or the got the listing checklist. Or you want to know if all your seller knows is how to contact the HOA or who manages it or where your bill comes from, that's a great start because they can reach out to that person and say, I'm going to need a status letter. I'm going to need all these things. Can you start by getting these documents together? Now, not every HOA has all these things. Almost all of them would have, and I think all of them would have declarations, articles of incorporation, bylaws, articles of operating, they might not have operation agreements. They probably have rules and regulations. They might not need party rules, okay? Their insurance policy, so you can look that over. The assessments, the recent financial documents. So you're looking at this, you're like, whoa, there's a lot of good stuff here, but not all of them have every single thing. But what this is saying in the contract is if it exists, it must go to the buyer, okay? So you can read this at your leisure and find out everything about like record change fees, that written notices about construction action defects. You obviously have to know if there's a lawsuit going on. And then it's conditional on the buyer's review. The buyer gets to, by the termination deadline, decide if they want to go through with the contract. Now, if you're on the seller side, when I list, the thing I like to get, and I don't remember if, I bet this is on my seller checklist, but I get the HOA contact, like I said, and I say another question that most sellers can answer is there an assessment that's planned or is in effect? So yes, there are a lot of sellers out there that don't pay attention, especially those with money and with multiple homes in different associations. They oftentimes will throw out their notices because they're like, whatever, just pay it when it's due. I'm not worried about it. So they might not know about assessments planned, but usually they do. They usually know if, oh yeah, there's some roof assessment. I'm not sure about how much I owe, but they know something about it, right? So that's all I'm asking. Don't don't assume that they're correct. There's also a lot of people who, you know, maybe you're talking to it's a relationship. There's two people selling the property. You talk to one of them, they happen to not be the one that pays the bills every month. So they go, oh yeah, it's $179 a month. You think, oh yeah. Don't assume, put it into Paragon that that's the price, because there are times that they go, oh, I didn't realize it was raised to $250 a few months ago. We didn't know, and now you get in trouble. So don't assume they're right, but do find out what the amount is, what it covers. I can't imagine there's a seller out there that doesn't know what their HOA covers, at least, right? Because they'll know what other, even if they're up at Purgatory, like they're in A-List or Alpenglow or whatever, they usually know what it covers because they'll know what other bills they're paying. Oh no, I have a Wi-Fi bill on top of that, so it definitely doesn't cover the Wi-Fi. So try to find out what it covers. And yes, you want to put all of that in the MLS. So especially if you're in one of these HOAs where it's $400, $500, $600 a month, you want to be very specific to people who are on the buyer side that don't know these associations to list. It covers all of your expenses, your Wi-Fi, your hardline phone. It covers the community association for blah, blah, blah. And then if there's an assessment, I try to just make that very obvious. So an assessment, let's say that there is a roof needed repairing, or they have to fix the elevator or any of that stuff. If you knew your seller was going to pay that off before closing, there's no reason to really disclose it. But obviously, if there's money that the buyer will have to pay, I like to put that in MLS so it's all very obvious to them. Okay. And then this whole idea of the status letter. So I was talking a great conversation with Malia yesterday. So when, again, I'm on an association, so I know this, when you go to close on a property that's within an HOA of any sort, there's going to be a status letter. Now, I believe this always comes from the title company once you're under contract. And I've had to fill them out before as the secretary for an association. I'm like, wow, there's some good stuff on here. It'll be 2 or 3 pages, and it'll say, what is the HOA fee? What day is it due? When was the last time this person paid? How much exactly will be due if it closes on the 28th of the month? Is there an assessment in place? How much is the balance that's due? Is the person, are they current on their association fees? And then it just goes on and on and on with all the information. And you can see why the title company needs this so that they can close the deal. So as long as the title company knows how to reach that HOA, there's usually no issue. And as far as I know, I remember hearing this in a class. I don't remember if this was in a CREC class, like one of our update classes every year, or if this was an attorney class I took. I don't remember. But I remember hearing that it has to go to the title company within, or maybe the buyer, within 14 days before closing. And I don't know, maybe it's changed since then, but I remember that there was a time. It's not like you need it before you go under contract, but you just want to know, is it going to be hard to get that? Because like Malia's doing a deal right now with somebody, with a HOA that's kind of like, oh, I'll get it to you when I can. So you want to know if it's one of those. I had one once where it was a tiny road association, and the person who ran it literally went out of town for 4 months every year. So Marcy and I got it under contract at the beginning of the 4 months, and there was no way we were going to hear from that person because we didn't have their number in Florida, and they don't like checking their email. So it just closed, and we had to kind of figure it out within the contract and say, this is what we know. We'll prorate it this way at closing, and good luck. That's all we can do. And then that's really it on the seller side. You try to get as many docs as you can. You try to look at, another thing I did, when you have an association that is very good about having everything online, a lot of these places have everything online. You want to go to that source and check that everything is there. Really, this is on the buyer side. You want to check this also. So they have the meeting minutes, right? They have the budgets. They have all that document. I took it upon myself as an agent to look at it and go, wait, hold on, that's 2020's budget. Where's 2021's? And then I reach out and say, are you about to put that on? Why is that not online? And then sometimes you would find minutes were missing, and you go, wait, it looks like they meet twice a year, but I haven't seen any minutes for a whole year. And so you call them and they go, oh yeah, I haven't gotten those up online yet. So I felt like it was my job as an agent to protect my seller or buyer to get that information that happened to not be online and send it to the person alongside. So then on the seller side also, last thing I can think of on that side is that, let me think. Did I just totally lose my train of thought? We make sure we have the documents. We make sure we get everything. Oh yeah, when you are sending it to the buyer side, I like to have a copy. You want to keep all your emails, you keep all your texts as an agent, you keep all your documents in a safe place, but I like to have a copy of what I sent to the buyer's agent, right? So if you're only sending them a link to the website, that's fine. And a verification that everything's on there is updated, that you checked with the HOA, that is perfectly fine. But can you just save the email and put it in IQ as your document, like a printout of what, not printout, but you know what I mean? Like save it as a PDF and put it in there. Because what I'll find people will do for their file is they put a link to the website. And I'm like, well, that doesn't show what was on there and what you sent. I feel like there needs to be a little bit harder evidence of the exact document. Because you know how like links expire after a while. You just want to have a good document, a good record, so that if you get in trouble, you have that right away. You can send to the attorney that's representing you if you happen to come into question years from now. Does that part make sense? Seller side. Okay, I'm going to move on to the buyer side. The buyer side is a lot more confusing. Malia, were you about to ask something? Okay, so the buyer side, I have on the buyer's letter that congratulations, you're under contract, and on the buyer checklist, both places to remind you that you want to ask your buyer if, when they get the documents, whether they want an attorney to review them. I was in business over 10 years before anyone ever had somebody take me up on it. And it was an engineer, of course, and they wanted an attorney to look over their documents to see whether the HOA was in good standing. And I thought, oh, wow, I actually have to do this now. So I sent them a list of attorneys. We called them until we found one that could answer his questions quickly. And I'll tell you, they did such a good job. It wasn't even an attorney. It was like a legal aid of the association. I think he only paid $150 or maybe $200. They went through the budget. They went through the association documents, and they went through everything just to see whether there were problems. Like, does the HOA actually have money, and does it look like they have enough reserves that if something happened, they could pay? That's an attorney went through that for him for really cheap. So when you get under contract, and just as soon as you get it, you might want to have the conversation before you get the association documents so you're ready to act. But think about it. You send them, oh yeah, maybe I want somebody to look at it. You got to give them the list of names. You say, just call someone until they can look it over. Don't be worried about like checking their references. Just get on their schedule. Then they're going to have to do the work, and you probably only have a few days to turn that around. That's why I used to ask for an entire week to fact check that HOA docs. I feel like there's so much in there that your buyer might want to look at. So I always gave 7 days in there. So the first step is to ask if they want an attorney, and you can remember this because it's on the buyer's checklist. And I also put it on that letter, congratulations. Do you want me to give you a list of names to get that checked? Now, if at any point you're with your buyer during the showings, during any part of the under contract in the very first portion where you know you have a red flag, they have a dog, were you planning on putting a fence up? Oh yeah, we're just gonna do an underground fence. Like, check it, make sure the covenants allow for whatever use it is. So you have, it's COVID now. I used to spend a lot more time with buyers than I bet you guys do now because I was driving them around in my car everywhere. But even so, you probably know them well enough to know some things about their background and in your original buyer interview about the things that were super important to them. So it's on you to not check the covenants, but to tell them, if you have questions, this is the time you have to get that figured out. I've had issues where the last year that I sold real estate where I had something that stumped me. It was a building, Kendall, up at Perg, where I was selling a unit and dogs are allowed. It said dogs are allowed on the building. I didn't think to check that because that was the case. But when you're dealing with a fractional, April Bates, when you're dealing with a fractional, the rules are different. So my little fractional wasn't allowed to have dogs because there's other owners of that unit. So I just never thought. I was like, the sign says that. It says in the covenants you can have dogs. And a week before closing, I called and they go, you can't have dogs in that unit. And my buyer was mad. And they still closed on it and snuck their dog in after closing. But there's a lot of things that need to be checked if you, and especially if you have a pet and you're selling a condo, just be sure that it's all cool. And it's not on you to check all those. Yes, if I've had a little old lady that I'm selling a place to, I might skim the covenants and say, I don't see anything, but I really think you should have an attorney review these, or I really think that you should do it yourself. Or I'd say, I don't notice anything, but there's a section about animals. Oh, the people who want chickens, like there's rules, there's covenants in town where I live. It's just Crestview, but there's rules that say no chickens. So even things that are allowed by a city or a township, you still could have rules against those things in a section that you really didn't think there would be. So check the covenants, have the buyers check the covenants. And if you wanna, if they say, can you just do that for me? Just be wary. And when you do it, point them to the sections and say, it sure looks like section 5.1 says something about chickens, but I want you to read that section for me. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to be on the spot that says, well, I see that it tells you. And then here's some other things you want to check on. Like I said, does the association have enough money? There was, I won't rat it out, but there's a subdivision that went in with $750,000 lots, and they had a 4-mile paved road, and they were collecting a couple $100 a year for snow plowing. I thought, well, and so people would look at the lots and they're like, wow, the HOA fee is so low here. And I'm like, there is no way in heck you are going to have like 35-acre lots and each person's given $200 a year, and that's actually going to pay for your plowing in a normal year. So use your best judgment to kind of look at it and go, wow, there's no money in savings right now. Their budget, it's not on you to do this, but you can kind of look at this stuff with them if you wanted to help them, but it's really on them to be looking at it. These are just things you're guiding your buyers with. You might want to check if they have enough money. What do I do? How do I check, Heather, if there's enough money in there? So maybe you could tell them if you notice a red flag, but the biggest one would be, is your budget $100,000 and you only have $20,000 in the bank? And there's a whole bunch of people who are late on their dues. Just things like that, just basics. Do they spend their money well? Here's a couple of examples that I've run into over the years. There is an association up at PERG. I don't think it's this way anymore, but most of the PERG associations went to DMMA. DMMA does an amazing job looking at whether an HOA, like what kind of money they're going to need in the future. They have these spreadsheets that will rock your world. They are going 20 years into the future, maybe it was even longer than that, exactly what they're going to have to do on the complex each year and how much money they're going to have to do each year in order to cover those things. A roof replacement, the elevator has to get fixed. We're thinking about painting the building, restuccoing, any of those things, they're all on the spreadsheet, and you're looking at it going, oh my gosh, how did they even think about all these things? Now, there was another place that had really cheap dues that was right across the plaza from it, and they had no money in the bank, and it was, I didn't sell up at PERG for very long, but the thing was, when you went up there and you noticed how cheap the HOAs were, well, you can see as a buyer, they would think, well, those HOAs are really cheap. So find out exactly what it covers and how many extra bills that person is going to have because the dues are so cheap. Maybe they still have to pay for their Wi-Fi and their all these things on their own. Some HOAs get together and they say, gosh, it would be really cheaper for cable if we do it together. And so part of the fee is because you have cable. So what happened in this one association is there were some fellows who were on the association that had been there literally like 30 years on this association. They wanted it to be as cheap as possible, but then there ended up being assessments almost every year that, oh, we got another $2,000 this year that everybody's going to have to pay up. This is going to have to be done because they didn't have any money in the bank, and things would always happen, and they didn't have that cool spreadsheet that DMMA has. Another big one was Faringway, way back in the day. So Faringway has all those stairs, and they also, the building got to a certain age where they had to not only repaint everything, but they had to redo all the stairs. And so they didn't have any money in the bank to do it. And I think back 10, 15 years ago when those condos were probably worth $130,000, right? And then all of a sudden, every single owner had to pay $8,000 that year. So we're going to charge you $8,000, and yeah, you have 2 years to pay it. So all of a sudden, maybe like 10 or 15 of them went on the market. It's a big subdivision, but they all went on the market, and people said, well, what's wrong with Faringway? It's like, well, they had a huge assessment and a bunch of people couldn't pay it. And so they're trying to move out. Spending it well. Okay, that's one. Minutes, checking the minutes for problems. Minutes are great to review even a couple of years back. If these are all things that you're not doing, you're telling your buyer, you might want to check the minutes for problems. So Skydancer had, back in the day, my best friend lived there, and there was one lady of a certain age that was in the subdivision, and she hated when there was snow. So she'd always call and complain, and they would want to help her they brought in all the plow people for 2 inches of snow or 1 inch of snow that you just walk to your car, you get it. But she kept saying, I'm going to sue you if you don't get rid of the snow. So they were like, the one winter, they just had no money in there because they were trying to help this one person. So if these things are happening, if people are complaining about parties or dogs, dogs going to the bathroom in the areas, any of those problems that you'll have, you better believe that in an association meeting, they're probably being talked about. So just skimming that for problems is a good thing. Or it's a good thing. Remember when I was talking about how not every seller really pays attention to the fact that there even is an association meeting? There's so many sellers like that. So they might not know stuff that they can disclose because they're not paying attention. But if you're checking the minutes, you can tell that the people in the association keep talking about something that needs to be done, but they're just not ready to do it yet. Like the $8,000 Faringway assessment, I bet that was in the HOA minutes for a long time before it actually happened. So that's a good way that, it's not on the seller to be updated on everything in their association. It's kind of on the buyer to check to make sure. These are also things an attorney can look at for somebody. Talking to another owner. I think it's a great idea. I had one up at Cascade Village where I had a very involved homeowner. She was the president of the board. And so on the board, they usually will give out the HOA will usually give out contact information for the board members. And I think it's a great idea if you have a person who really wants to know more about their HOA to call a board member and ask some questions. Just like, I just want to get the feel for what it's like. It's kind of like when you're getting a new, you're moving anywhere, you want to talk to the neighbors, right? So how is the association? Are you guys in good standing? Are there assessments that you guys are talking about? Is there anything I should know about this? And then also, what about talking to someone who's not on the board? Because maybe those association members aren't doing a good job and they're like, yes, of course, everything's good. What are you talking about? And then you talk to one of the neighbors and you go, oh my gosh, those people have been running us into the ground. It's driving us crazy. They're making all these rules. It's getting really hard to live here. So just getting not the seller's information, but someone there that maybe they could talk to that's an active member of the association, or just knocking on someone's door. There's just nothing wrong with that if you're a buyer. I know it's COVID, but just sending them out to check out the subdivision. I always have my people check it out on 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock on a Friday night, like especially if you're in the neighborhoods, to see what the neighborhood is like. But they say, do you think there's a lot of parties around here? And like, just drive by on a Friday night, see what's going on. Like, I'd love to. That's a good way to know more. And you don't want to be that person that, as a buyer, that moves into a place and then you get the knock on the door the next day and they go, I can't believe you bought this place with everything going on. And like, what are you talking about? So you better believe that neighbors will always tell you the bad stuff. They just love complaining. You want the people to feel good about moving into the association. And it does, like Malia was saying yesterday, if you have an association that's really tough to get information from, or they're really just not communicative, it's probably going to be that way for your buyers into infinity. So just have them feel good about it and know that there's not much they can do, but I always encourage my buyers to get involved in the board. It's like, if you want to be an active homeowner, it's a great idea. There's very few people want to run for the board, and so it's good to be involved. Red flags. Loans for things that are already have been done. There's a subdivision that we have agents that live in, and it's an older 80s subdivision, condos. And I remember showing it where there were 2 loans that their HOA dues were paying off. It's like an assessment. So let's say they not only had no money in the bank, but they had to get a loan to fix the blacktop, and then they had to get another loan to fix the roof. So you were still paying this off like 5 years after it happened, and it was going to be like a 10-year loan. And I thought, so at the end of the 10 years, how many other things have racked up that you're paying for? So there's like some $2,000 assessment over here. There's another assessment. So having to get a loan to fix something, yeah, money's cheap sometimes. It just seems like a big red flag to me. I guess if I saw that there was a ton of money in their bank account, but they got the loan because the money was so cheap, they could pay it off any minute, but it made more sense for them to keep the money in the bank, maybe that would be okay. But it just seemed to me, I had never seen that before, and I thought that's probably a pretty big red flag. Issues in the minutes. Loans. Okay, this is, I don't have too much more I need to talk about on this, except no record keeping. We talked about that. But loans, I don't know if this is still the case, but it was the case for so long that I'm going to use my home up at Lemon as an example. It's in a subdivision that never had a road agreement. And we're getting a lot of work done this spring, and it hasn't been done in many years. So I just took it upon myself to call all my neighbors, and I said, look, I'm going to put a couple $1,000 in the pot. I would like some other people to do it as well. I use the property more than you guys do, so I'm willing to pay more. And I had a whole bunch of people stand up and say, I'll put $1,000 in. So all of a sudden we have all this money to do work on the road. And I'm so lucky that it happened that way. But we have no agreement that says that you have to pay. I could go about trying to rally up my troops to get a road agreement in place. But if you're getting a loan on a house, I think that for some loans, they need a road agreement in place. And that never seems to come up until the end of the contract. I had it happen twice. Now, I have no idea, is it only like FHA and VA that makes it happen? All I know is that I was very far along in the contract, past our inspections, and the bank spit back from underwriting, which, you know, is fairly close to closing. It says, oh, you need a road agreement. There's no road agreement. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, they just kind of pay that guy, and everybody gets together and they pay the guy, and he plows the road. What's the big deal? And they said, no, you need something. So then you had to physically like make these sellers write something up and then go record it just so that you could get it closed because of the loan. I have no idea. Has anybody come into that they know like, oh, that only is FHA loans? Otherwise, just be wary. There are very few areas like that. I ran into it over in like, you know, that like County Road 223, 225, kind of like near the gun range. There was a place like that. And then my area is all the way up at Lemon. It's one of those like 1970s neighborhoods that was not much ever happened with it. And people just did what they needed to get in. But you'll get in one of those places that are like, oh yeah, there's just no road agreement. It's only 4 people that use it. That maybe if you're the first one or you have an access that's almost off the county road, it won't be a big deal. But if you're further back, you can have lenders that that make that be an issue. Okay, I think that is all I needed. Checklist. I'm not going to show you the checklist. I'm just going to tell you that that's in there. Is there anything else that you guys have questions about that's come up for you? When you have the deadlines, I always like to give a whole week between the association documents and when they were given and when you had to have a response. Now, if you have someone that says, I'm not sure if I want to go to an attorney or not, say it takes a little bit of time for us to arrange for the attorney. There's only so many in town. So can you make up your mind tonight? Let's say it's the date that you get the association docs. Say, can you make up your mind tonight? You go over some of the things that are important for someone to look at, and then you call them back again the next day. They make the decision, no, I'm good. I'll take the time to read this. Let's say that's Wednesday morning and your deadline is going to be the following Tuesday. So then I'd check again on Thursday before I went home for the day. I'd wait a couple days. I never want to be like poking at people, but I just want to keep on them as much as I can. And so maybe Thursday before I went home, I'd say, hey, I just wanted to see, did anything come up for you on the association documents? Because you know what they're going to say is, oh, I didn't check those yet. So then I check again Friday. If they didn't get back to me, maybe by the end of the day, I'd send an email because I don't want to bug them. I'd send an email to both of them and say, hey, just as a reminder, didn't hear from you today, but if you have any questions about the association documents, let's talk on Monday morning. You don't want them to call you on the weekend. Let's talk Monday morning and see if there's anything I can help you with. Otherwise, Tuesday at the end of the day is the last date for us to terminate if you have a problem. Let me know if you have questions. And then again on the day of, I'd say one more time until I get something in writing. I am saying, are you sure you have nothing? No, I'm good. I'm good. And if they tell you I'm good, you write it down. You say, spoke to customer on 3/23 and they said they have no problem with the association. And that's good. If they tell you they're good, they're fine. It's when they say, oh, I'll look at that. Oh, I'll look at that. Because you know what happens. It's always like down to the wire before they do. But, well, that's all.
Real quick, if you're looking at a listing in MLS, you can search the associated docs. And sometimes the realtors put all the HOA stuff in there. I don't know if you guys know all that or not, but you can sometimes look there and it'll be in there, all the HOA stuff. But I just wanted to bring that up.
If you get anything and you're on the listing side, you want to be the most helpful person you are. You put all your disclosures up. Yes, you're going to send them the CTME disclosures when you get it under contract, as long as your seller's okay with it. I put a map of how to find the place. I put the GIS map. I put the HOA docs, anything that can go in there. The only thing I would say, I just talked to Gene about this. We used to be a company that we had 2 large filing cabinets. Actually, I think it was 4 in the back. And it was every single subdivision that anyone had ever sold. And then we organized all the covenants in each file. So back in the day, if somebody was interested in a subdivision, they said, can you find one that, let's say it was vacation rentals or whatever the thing was back then, fences for horses. I would go back, I'd pull the file and I'd kind of look through the covenants. And you knew in your brain that they could be newer ones now, but you at least got an idea if they were ever not allowed. So Gina said the other day, get rid of all of them because we have no idea if they're current. Like it's almost a liability to have them. So I will caution you on the seller side about putting covenants up unless it's a link because you want it to go somewhere other than like you told them there were dogs allowed. And then on the buyer side, if you're ever reading stuff like that, because you still have some old school realtors that will put up covenants on the associated docs, just know they continue to be updated. So what'll happen is you have covenants that can actually expire. Like maybe it says in there, this is only good for 20 years unless it's renewed. And then you also have ones that are constantly amended and it'll say, you know how we only allowed you to have 2 dogs? Well, now it's only going to be 1. So it's kind of like you tell your buyer to check them all out. And if there's something that's of interest to you, keep checking all the amendments and make sure that they didn't change that one thing. But yeah, I say, Luis, what Luis said is you load up that associated documents section to make it easier on the buyers. Thank you.
And I found that when you get title work, like I just did one, or I'm working on one in Trappers Crossing that has been, they have rules and bylaws, they have a lot of stuff, but then so many of them have been amended. And so when we got title work, it was, here's these covenants amended here, 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 and here, and going through and making sure that we've like read the most recent ones and stuff.
I know, it really is difficult. And I found it like Enchanted Forest was one. I did so much work up in the Lemon Lake area, and it would be like, when they originally did it, they wanted these to be commercial. These certain lots were commercial up there. And then like, you could have horses on these 4. And so people would say, well, I want to have a horse. And you're like, okay, well, this one says that these 4, but then they'd amend it on a more recent one. And it's just, everybody's different. And I tried to do, the longer I was in business, the less helpful I wanted to be by finding the information for them. I wanted to find the place for them to get the information, but I really tried to take myself out of it because people get lazy when you're going to do it for them. So I would just try to empower people to find it themselves. Like, here's all the places, here's what to look for. Please tell me what you want to do. And if there's anything I can do to help, I will, but I just don't. And you just tell them, I don't want to read it wrong. You're the ones that have to live there. I don't want to be wrong about it. And then you find out it's a different way. So, and that's another thing, like Anna, that if you find it, let's say it's the horse thing or the vacation rental thing. Let's say it doesn't say anything about vacation rentals in there, but maybe it's a city rule that's, or not city, but like a county rule that even though the covenants say it, the county says you can't do it unless you do it a certain way. I usually had them, I'd have them reach out to the HOA person with that particular question. And then I'd also reach out to like the county with that question to make sure it wasn't like, well, it said in here I could do it. Yeah, but that was written 20 years ago and we've updated the county code. It's just, it gets really confusing. That's why we get paid so much when we actually close something.
This just happened to me where the old HOA docs said that a guest house could not have a kitchen.
That's what I was, oh, the kitchen, that's different than the one I was thinking you were going to say.
So random. Yeah, but it was because the water was so limited up on the western side of town. But since Lake Durango and Lake Nighthorse have opened, there's more water available. And so it's changed in the county where you can do it as long as it's, you know, you have the same water tap and whatever, it has to be shared. But they amended the covenants also to reflect that. So
wow, we have a it didn't end up in a lawsuit, it almost did, but we had a complaint against one of our agents who sold a home that had a kitchen in the guest home that wasn't allowed, but they advertised it as a space, and it was the exact wording that they used that the seller told them to use, that they ended up getting a complaint at. It was thrown out, so everything was fine, but it was like 3 months of her life that she's not getting back, that she had somebody mad at her for something that she just, I did what the seller told me to do. I'm sorry, I didn't know there was some rule. I should have checked, but I didn't. But our lives, oh my gosh.